The door didn't open. I stood there in the hallway at 11:47 at night, my key halfway in the lock, my grocery bag cutting into my wrist, and I just stood there. I tried again. I pulled it out. I looked at the key like maybe I'd grabbed the wrong one, but it was the right key. The little blue rubber cap on it, the one I'd put on 2 years ago so I could find it fast in my purse, it was right there. I pushed it in again. Nothing. The lock had changed. I knocked. I don't know why I knocked on the door of my own condo, but I did. My brother opened it. He was in a t-shirt and sweatpants, looking like he'd been settled in for hours. Behind him, I could see his wife sitting on my couch, a blanket over her lap, the television on. My television. My couch. My blanket, probably. "What are you doing here?" I said. He crossed his arms. "We're staying here for a while. It's better this way." Better for who? This is my home. I pay the mortgage on this condo. I have been paying it for 6 years. His wife didn't look up from the TV. "You've been struggling," he said. "Mom and Dad are worried. We all talked. We thought it would be better if someone responsible was here to take care of things while you get your head together." I stared at him. Get my head together? I just came back from a 12-hour shift. I'm a surgical technician. I have to be at the hospital at 6 in the morning. You can stay at Mom's. I live here. He started to close the door. I put my hand on it. He looked at my hand, then at me, and said very calmly, very quietly, "The HOA office is already updated. We handled everything today. You should go get some sleep." He closed the door. I stood in that hallway for a long time. Long enough that the motion sensor light clicked off and I was standing in the dark. I could hear the television through the door. Some laugh track from a sitcom. I sat down against the wall with my grocery bag between my knees, and I called my mother. She picked up on the second ring, which meant she was awake, which meant she knew. "You need to come stay here for a little while," she said, before I could say anything. "Just until things calm down." "What things? What has to calm down? I'm fine. You've been under a lot of stress. You've been forgetting things. Your brother is just trying to help." "Mom, he changed the locks on my condo. It's just temporary." I hung up. I sat in that hallway until midnight, trying to understand what had just happened. My brother and his wife had been having money problems. I knew that. They'd been staying in a one-bedroom apartment across town, behind on rent. I had heard things through family dinners, through offhand comments. I had even offered to loan him money once, about 8 months ago. And he had said no, they were fine. They had a plan. I guess I was the plan. I drove to a hotel that night. It was $63, which I charged to my credit card while sitting in the parking lot trying not to cry. I didn't sleep. I lay on top of the comforter with my work clothes on, staring at the ceiling tiles, running through everything in my head. The mortgage was in my name. I had bought that condo at 31 years old, on my own, with a down payment I had saved for 4 years. My name was the only name on the deed. My brother had no legal right to be there. But he had said the HOA office was updated. That was the part I kept coming back to. What did that mean? At 7:30 the next morning, I was sitting in the waiting area of the HOA management office when the property manager arrived to open up. Her name was on the door in small gold letters. She had a coffee in one hand and a tote bag in the other, and she stopped when she saw me on the bench outside. I said, "I need to talk to you about my unit. I think something happened yesterday while I was at work." She unlocked the door and let me in. I told her everything while she pulled up my account on her computer. She didn't say much at first. She just typed. Then she stopped typing and leaned closer to the screen. "When did you say this happened?" "Yesterday. I came home around midnight and the lock had been changed. My brother told me he had handled everything with the office." She scrolled up. She scrolled back down. She clicked on something and read carefully. "Someone came in yesterday at 2:15 in the afternoon," she said slowly. "They submitted a request to add an authorized resident and transfer emergency contact and access authorization to a secondary party." She paused. "The paperwork shows a power of attorney document." I felt something cold move through my chest. I didn't sign a power of attorney. She turned the monitor slightly so I could see it. There on the screen was a scanned document. Power of attorney, authorizing my brother to act on my behalf in all matters related to the property. My name at the top, a signature at the bottom. I looked at that signature for a long time. It looked like mine the way a photocopy of a photocopy looks like the original. The general shape was right, but the way I crossed my T's, the slight backward lean I've had since middle school, it wasn't there. It was close, but it wasn't me. "I never signed that," I said. She was quiet for a moment. Then she picked up the phone on her desk. "I need to call our property attorney before I do anything else," she said. "Can you stay right here?" I nodded. She made the call with me sitting across from her. She spoke quietly. At one point, she turned her chair slightly away from me. When she hung up, she looked at me with a very careful expression. "Our attorney is advising us to contact law enforcement before we take any further action on this account. Is that okay with you?" "Yes," I said. "Absolutely yes." While we waited for the officer to arrive, I sat in that office and read through every line of the document on her screen. The power of attorney had been notarized. It had an official stamp on it, but when I looked at the notary seal, something was off. The name on the seal was slightly blurred. The registration number underneath it had one digit that looked smeared, like someone had altered it. I pointed this out to the property manager. She leaned in and looked. She didn't say anything, but she took a screenshot. The officer arrived at 9:20. He was younger than I expected, thorough in a quiet way. He sat down, took out a notepad, and asked me to start from the beginning. I told him everything. The key not working, my brother at the door, the conversation in the hallway, the hotel room. I put my hotel receipt on the table. I put my original purchase agreement for the condo on the table. I had driven back to the hotel and gotten my laptop and pulled the digital copy from my email. I put that on the table too. He looked at the power of attorney document on the property manager's screen. "Have you ever worked with a notary?" he asked. "Not for anything related to this property. The only notary I've ever used was for a document at the hospital, about 3 years ago, for a patient consent form issue." He wrote something down. "And you've never authorized your brother to act on your behalf in any property matters?" "Never. He doesn't even know what I pay in HOA fees." The officer asked the property manager if she could pull the intake log from the previous day, specifically whether the person who submitted the document had provided any additional identification. She pulled it up. My brother had presented a photo ID. His own, which made sense, but the form also asked for the property owner's ID to verify the authorization. The person who processed the paperwork had accepted a phone screen showing what appeared to be my driver's license photo. The property manager closed her eyes for just a second when she saw that. The person who had processed the intake was not her. It was a part-time front desk associate. "The procedure requires a physical ID from the authorizing party," she said quietly. "Not a photo on someone else's phone." The officer nodded and kept writing. He called for a second officer to meet him at my condo unit. He asked me not to come to the unit yet. He said it was better to handle the initial contact without me there, to reduce the chance of a confrontation escalating. I understood. I sat in the management office waiting, and the property manager quietly made me a cup of coffee from the little machine on the credenza and put it in front of me without saying anything, which was one of the kindest things anyone had done for me in the past 12 hours. About 40 minutes later, the first officer came back to the office. My brother and his wife had been at the unit. He had told them there were questions about the authorization documents. My brother had been cooperative at first, then had gotten loud, then had gotten very quiet. His wife had started to cry. Neither of them had left voluntarily. The officer placed a call, and I heard him use the phrase, "suspected document fraud and forged notarization." My brother called me at 10:53. I watched his name light up on my screen, and I let it ring. Then my mother called. Then my father. I sat in the management office with 4 missed calls stacking up on my phone, and I drank the coffee that the property manager had made me, and I did not pick up. By 11:30, law enforcement had confirmed with the state notary registry that the registration number on the notary seal of the power of attorney was invalid. The number had been altered. The legitimate notary with that name there was, one was registered in a different county and had no record of witnessing this document. Her seal had been copied and the registration number changed by 1 digit. The property manager pulled the full audit log of every change made to my account over the previous 48 hours. Lock change request, submitted at 2:15 p.m. Approved by front desk at 2:40. Emergency contact change, submitted and processed at 2:50. Authorized access list, updated at 3:05. All of it done in under an hour, while I was in an operating room assisting on a knee replacement surgery. The officer came and stood in the office doorway. "We're going to need a formal statement from you," he said. "And you should know the documents are being treated as evidence of criminal fraud and forgery. That's a felony in this state." I had been holding myself together all morning through some kind of operating room focus, the same way I hold myself together when something goes sideways during a procedure. You don't fall apart until it's over. But when he said felony, I felt the word land somewhere physical, somewhere in my sternum, and I had to breathe through my nose for a second before I could respond. "What happens to my brother?" I asked. The officer was straightforward with me, which I appreciated. He said that would depend on what the investigation found. If the forgery was confirmed, and at this point it was looking like it would be, charges would likely include forgery of a legal instrument, obtaining access to property by deception, and potentially identity fraud. He said it in a matter-of-fact way, like he was reading off a menu, and somehow that made it easier to hear. I gave my formal statement. It took about 45 minutes. I was precise. I work in a field where precision matters, where the difference between the right instrument and the wrong one can change someone's life in a moment, and I brought that same precision to every detail I gave them. Times, conversations, what was said word for word, the hotel receipt, the timestamp on my call to my mother. When they were done, the officer told me I could return to my unit. The property manager walked me up herself. She had a master key for the new lock that my brother had arranged to have changed. She used it, and then she handed me 2 new keys and said, "We'll have the locks changed again this afternoon at no cost to you. I'm sorry this happened. What our associate did violated our procedures, and that won't happen again." I thanked her. I meant it. I walked into my condo. My grocery bag from the night before was still on the kitchen counter. I had put it down when I came in to knock and apparently hadn't even thought to take it when I left. There were 2 glasses in the sink. The blanket was still on the couch, folded over the arm of it. The television remote was on the coffee table at the wrong angle. Small evidence of people who had believed, for about 12 hours, that they had successfully taken my home. I stood in the middle of my living room for a minute. The morning sun was coming through the window. I'd installed the blinds on myself 2 years ago because I wanted them at exactly the height I wanted them. The small ceramic bowl on the entryway table that I had bought at a farmer's market in the fall. The framed print on the wall I had saved up for and bought myself as a birthday gift the year I got my certification. Everything I had built in this place, piece by piece, with my own money and my own hours and my own choices. I called work and told them I would need a personal day. My supervisor asked if I was okay. I said I would be. She said take whatever I needed. I sat down on my couch and I called back my mother. She answered on the first ring this time. I did not yell. I was very calm. I told her exactly what had happened, including the part where law enforcement was involved and the part where the word felony had been used. I told her that my brother had forged my signature on a legal document and altered a notary seal, and that those things had consequences that no amount of family politics was going to make go away. I told her that I did not want anyone to call me for a while, that I needed space, and that when I was ready to talk, I would reach out. She started to say something about how he was family, how we needed to work this out as a family, how there were always 2 sides. "There's one side," I said. "It's the side with the forged documents and the felony investigation. I'll talk to you when I'm ready." I hung up. 2 days later, my brother was formally charged: forgery of a legal instrument, criminal impersonation, obtaining property by deception. His wife was also charged in connection with the scheme. She had been the one to photograph my signature from a card I had signed on her birthday years ago and pass it to whoever had been traced to the reproduction. The notary seal had been purchased as a crafting item online and altered with basic editing software. 3 weeks later, the HOA sent me a formal letter of apology and a revised intake protocol. They had retrained every front desk employee on document verification. The part-time associate who had processed the paperwork without proper verification was no longer working there. The property manager called to tell me this personally. I got a restraining order. My attorney said it was straightforward given the documented fraud. My brother and his wife were required to stay away from my property and to have no contact with me. They had moved in with my parents, which meant I had to establish limited contact with my parents as well for the time being, and that was a grief of its own kind. The kind that sits heavy and complicated and doesn't resolve cleanly. My mother still called sometimes and left voicemails that started with, "I just want you to know we love you," and ended with something about how my brother had been struggling and nobody wanted things to go this far. I listened to them once each and then archived them. I am not a person who gives up on family easily. I want to say that clearly. I grew up in a house where we were told that you work things out, you stay, you forgive, because at the end of the day, they're the only family you've got. I believed that for a long time. I still want to believe a version of it. But I also know the difference between a family that struggles and makes mistakes and a family that conspires. What my brother did was not a mistake made in a desperate moment. It took planning. It took research. Someone looked up what a power of attorney form looks like. Someone found a notary seal template. Someone photographed my signature off a birthday card. which means someone kept that card for exactly this kind of purpose. That is not a mistake. That is a project. And it nearly worked. If I had come home even 30 minutes later, if the property manager who opened the office that morning had been anyone less meticulous, if the officer who responded hadn't thought to check the notary registry, if the audit trail in the HOA system hadn't time-stamped every single entry, any one of those things, and I might have spent weeks fighting to prove what was mine in a legal process that favors whoever has the paperwork. I want people to hear that part, the paperwork part, because we assume that our name on a deed means something absolute and untouchable. And it does legally. It does, but someone determined enough to forge documents and alter a seal is counting on the fact that most of us don't check. That most of us don't know what a power of attorney is supposed to look like, or how to verify a notary seal, or what questions to ask an HOA office manager when something feels wrong. Now I know. I had the locks changed again in January. New hardware entirely. I set up document alerts with my county recorder's office. They exist. Most people don't know about them. They will email you if any document is recorded against your property. I put a credit freeze on my file. I kept copies of everything from the case in a folder on my phone, backed up to the cloud, with a second copy on a flash drive in my desk at work. I am still a surgical technician. I still get up before 6 most mornings. I still come home to my condo, to the blinds I hung at exactly the right height, to the bowl from the farmer's market, to the print I bought myself the year I got certified. None of that changed. My brother's hearing is scheduled for next month. I have been told I may need to provide a victim impact statement. I have been thinking about what I want to say. Not what I want him to hear. I'm past the point of believing the right words will change anything in him. But what I want to say for myself, to put it somewhere official and documented and real, the way everything in this whole situation has had to be documented and verified and proven before anyone would act on it. I want the record to show that I built something, that I worked for it and saved for it and chose every single detail of it. That what my brother tried to take was not just square footage and a mortgage payment, but 6 years of my own choices. And that when someone tried to erase that on a Tuesday afternoon while I was in an operating room, the evidence they left behind was enough. The audit trail was enough. The timestamp on a lock change request at 2:15 p.m. was enough. It is always enough. That is the thing I learned. Whatever they do in secret leaves a record. Every document filed, every system accessed, every lock changed, it all gets logged somewhere. They counted on me not knowing how to look. They were wrong about that. I know how to look now. And I am not going anywhere.